If there's one thing I can 100% certainly tell you is unavoidable, and it honestly is, that is stress. And there's no way around it. And the real question that you should be asking isn't how do I get rid of stress? It's how do I deal with it without letting it ruin me? Because for a lot of people, stress will ruin your life. It will tear you down and it will make you choose very bad habits and terrible coping mechanisms. Because most of us don't cope with stress well. We distract ourselves from it. And I know that because I did it too. We all do it. At some point in our lives, we've dealt with stress in terrible ways. For a long time, I thought coping meant staying busy, numbing it out, pushing things off until later. But life never really slows down, and stress doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It stores itself in your body. That's when I learned something that changed everything for me. Stress is physical before it's mental. For example, when you're stressed, your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Your heart rate increases, your breathing gets shallow, and your nervous system shifts into a fight or flight. So if your body thinks you're in danger, you can't just think your way out of it. That's why the first real step to coping with stress isn't changing your mindset. Although that is very important, the first step is calming the body. One of the simplest things I started doing, and this sounds almost too basic, but was fixing my breathing. Slow down, slow down. Slow, deep breaths, especially long exhales. Science shows that long exhales activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your body responsible for rest and recovery. In simple terms, breathing slowly tells your brain you're safe. And that's the first step to stopping stress in its tracks for the meantime. And once your body starts to calm down, your thoughts stop racing as much. Not instantly, but noticeably, and becomes more manageable. Another thing I had to learn was that stress needs to go somewhere. Stress hormones don't disappear on their own. If you don't burn them off, they just circulate. That's where movement comes in. Not extreme workouts, not punishment, just consistent movement. When I get stressed, I like to walk around. Like I will pace back and forth a lot, and it's just something that helps me manage my stress. Light exercise, getting your body out of that frozen state. Me personally, I sometimes feel when I'm really stressed out, it can almost paralyze me. So when I calm down and when I do something to calm me down and I just start to move, it really gets me out of that weird state that the stress puts me in. There's a reason exercise is constantly linked to lower anxiety and depression. It metabolizes cortisol. It gives stress an exit. There were some times when I've been really stressed out just dropping and doing a few push-ups. Not very many, not really pushing myself, just a few, get myself moving, and it would help me out a lot. And then on the opposite side of exercising and calming ourselves down, there's the issue of sleep, the most underrated coping tool of all. I'm not talking about being stressed out in the middle of the day and saying I need a nap because you're trying to avoid work you're doing. I'm talking about making sure at the end of a day you're getting the proper amount of sleep and a comfortable amount of sleep for you to be able to process and work through the next day. I used to treat sleep like something optional, like something I could sacrifice to get ahead. But research shows that the lack of sleep keeps cortisol levels elevated and weakens emotional regulation. That's why everything feels harder when you're tired, because it literally is. Once I started protecting my sleep, I noticed I wasn't reacting to stress the same way. I still had problems, but they didn't crush me. Just remember, sleep deprivation is a real thing, and although a lot of people can push through little amounts of sleep, you've got to catch up on that somehow. You've got to gain back that rest you're losing. For me, for example, yes, during the week, I'm usually up late, and I know I get short hours of sleep, but come the weekend, I make sure to make up for it. I make sure I get plenty of rest so that the next coming week, I can still withstand those short sleeping periods and still get what I want to get done. Moving on from that, I want to discuss one of the most difficult parts about dealing with stress and the parts that everyone struggles with because it's you working against your brain. It's you working against your own hormones. And in today's world where there's so many distractions, it's so difficult. And this is when and one of the things I struggled with the most, and that is when I had to stop running from discomfort. Every time I avoided stress, I procrastinated, I scrolled on my phone, which is the most common thing to do. I numbed out. I was teaching my brain that stress was dangerous, and the brain responds to perceived danger by amplifying it. Psychologists call this avoidance coping, and it's the worst way to cope, besides obviously doing hard drugs. And studies show it actually increases stress over time. It doesn't reduce it at all. So the common thought is that, well, yeah, I'm avoiding it, but it's helping me reduce my stress, so I'll just scroll for a little bit, then I'll deal with it later. But it actually just piles the stress up more, and you're just hurting your situation. You just don't realize it at the moment. So instead, I started doing something small but uncomfortable. I acknowledged stress when it showed up, and I'd name it. Sit with it for a minute, not spiral, not run straight to my phone. I wouldn't run straight to going to the TV to watch something or just trying to distract myself. I just notice it, and I just sit with my thoughts and think about it. And that alone reduced its power. Something so simple. And there's a quote I love that explains this perfectly. What you resist persists. Stress feeds on resistance. When you stop fighting it and start responding to it, it loses control. And when I talk about fighting it, you don't need to completely get rid of that one stressful thing altogether, but just being proactive towards it. Maybe it's a deadline for something that you have to work towards. Just doing little bits and being proactive to finish that is enough to cut that stress down immensely. Another big shift was being honest about dopamine. One of the best things I've learned growing up in my early 20s was having an understanding of dopamine and how it works for us. In a world filled with distractions and small dopamine hits, it's very easy to get lost and have your brain confused. So essentially, when you're stressed, your brain craves relief. That's why quick dopamine hits, porn, alcohol, junk food, drugs, endless scrolling on your phone feel so tempting. They work short term, but science shows these spikes are followed by crashes that increase anxiety and cortisol, which then increases stress. And some will argue, well, these things I enjoy smoking and alcohol and junk food, and you can enjoy those things, but you have to understand the fine line of, am I drinking alcohol, am I eating junk food, or am I smoking, or whatever? Am I doing it because I'm avoiding something? Am I doing it because I'm stressed out about stuff? Or am I doing it because I actually enjoy it? You have to realize why you're doing these things. Because yeah, I mean, a lot of people enjoy drinking and having an alcoholic beverage or getting drunk with friends, but it gets dangerous when you're doing it to avoid things. That's when you start doing it when it doesn't make sense to do it. And before anyone asks, I didn't cut out enjoyable things in my life. I just stopped relying on them for instant relief. When I go with my friends to go drinking, I do it because I want to and there's an occasion for it. I don't do it because I'm trying to avoid a stressful situation in my life. I replace some of it with lower rewards. As I stopped trying to rely on those instant relief habits, I try to replace some of it with slower rewards, like working towards something and completing it. And that dopamine hit you get when finishing something that you've created or learned something new that you've done on your own, even letting myself be bored at times. Your brain, you can soft reset your brain when it comes to dopamine. You can learn to enjoy other things. A lot of people don't like, for example, I never really enjoyed reading, but something I knew I wanted to be better at was being a better reader. I wanted to read novels. I wanted to learn. And so I started to really push myself to learn how to like reading. And it was hard at first. I didn't like it. It was boring. But after my brain got used to being bored and I started actually learning, I started to get dopamine from doing that as I made it a habit and consistently doing it into my day-to-day life. And slowly, motivation came back on its own as my brain started to reset its way of getting dopamine. A neuroscientist, Andrew Huberman, puts it, the ability to tolerate discomfort is the gateway to long-term dopamine. And one thing that mattered more than I expected was connection. Stress isolates you. It convinces you that you're behind, you're broken, and you're alone. But talking to someone you trust releases oxytocin, which directly counters cortisol. That's not emotional fluff, that's just biology, and that's how, when we really start to understand the biology of ourselves, is when we really truly understand ourselves. You're not meant to carry everything by yourself. The biggest change of all, though, was how I viewed stress. Instead of seeing it as proof that something was wrong with me, I started seeing it as feedback from my body, a signal. My body saying something needs attention here. Not every stressor needs to be eliminated. Some need boundaries, some need rest, some need action. And stress is everywhere, never going to go away usually. Coping properly with stress isn't about being calm all the time. It's about learning when you need to be calm. It's about recovering fast. It's about spacing out your energy. It's about not letting stress pile up until it defines who you become. And when you learn that, you start to realize from other peers or seeing other people that you may work with, or you start to identify who's more stressed than other people, because it starts to show on people. There's a quote that sticks with me the most out of all of them. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Stress isn't the enemy, ignoring the stress is. And learning how to cope with it properly might be one of the most important skills you build in your entire life, especially in your early 20s, where everything is a stressor on your physical and mental health. If you're struggling with dealing with stress or have stressful things going on in your life that you'd like to share, leave a comment down below. I'm always open to have a discussion with people. Thank you for watching.